Hi, I'm John Boughton with NAR Media, joined by Austin Perez of NAR Government Affairs. There's been a lot happening on the subject of flood insurance, how it affects current homeowners and what it means to pending transactions and sales. So Austin, a lot of activity here in Washington on it. Why so much attention on the issue?
Good question. So we have a national flood insurance program. It's a federal program that provides flood insurance. It requires an authorization by Congress to continue writing insurance. This program, the authority for this program expires every 5 years. We're now coming up on a date, September 30th of 2017, which is the next time that Congress has to make a decision to extend authority for the program.
So what happens to home sales if the program expires?
NFIP can no longer write flood insurance. So that means that if you have a closing, you have a closing coming up and the program is shut down and it requires flood insurance because a mortgage is involved, you can't get flood insurance from the National Flood Insurance Program. That's not to say you can't get flood insurance from the private market, and there is a small but growing market, but it would mean that the federal program would not be able to provide flood insurance.
The threat of big rate increases, big flood insurance rate increases has been something that NAR has talked about in the past. Is that on the table, or is it something that homeowners are going to see?
So the Biggert Waters law a couple of years ago had a clause that you would have to pay the full cost at closing. So if there are a number of properties right now with subsidized flood insurance priced below cost. And so what Biggert Waters said is that if you sell your property, then the new owner couldn't keep that subsidized rate. They would have to go to full cost risk. We heard, as well as Congress heard, from a number of people with concerns about last minute surprises and sticker shock and closings. And so a couple of years ago, the Flood Insurance Affordability Act rolled back those rates. Now, something to clarify is the rates are still going up. They're just not going up to full cost overnight at the closing table. Instead, they're phasing in over 10, 25% per year until they reach that full cost rate. So rather than seeing the jump at the closing table, you might see it in 5 or 10 years, but those rates are not gone. They were not eliminated. They were just slowed down. So that will be one of the focuses of Congress, is what to do about this. Do they want to continue to keep the rates phasing in, or do they want to do something different?
I know legislation dealing with flood insurance was recently introduced. What was it, and is NAR supportive?
So there's a lot of new legislation that's being introduced in anticipation of this September 30th deadline. Congress, when they reauthorize the flood insurance program, they don't just extend the authority for the program to write new policies. They also include a number of reforms to the program. So everyone who has an idea for how they would like to reform the federal program are stepping forward to put in bills that they would like to have considered as part of that reauthorization discussion. One bill we're really excited about is to encourage a private flood insurance market. NAR supports private flood insurance as well as national flood insurance program. The bill itself is called the Flood Insurance Market Parity and Modernization Act. It's actually has companion bills both introduced in the House and the Senate. In the Senate, Senator Hellers and Tester have introduced the bill. In the House, it's Representative Ross and Castor. Essentially, what this private flood bill does, which NAR fully supports, is it clarifies a particular issue with the current Biggert Waters law. Right now, in order for private flood insurance to be allowed under federal law, for a lender to accept that to satisfy the purchase of flood insurance requirement as part of a mortgage, you have to show that the private flood meets 7 criteria. Those are very strict criteria. There are very few private policies, other than a private company that wants to put forward the federal policy and just add coverage. So there are very few private policies that meet this definition. What this bill would essentially do is it would say, first, any NFIP, any private flood policy, in order to meet the flood insurance requirements, first it would have to provide a minimum amount of flood insurance coverage, which is currently required by federal law. But for other matters of insurance like deductibles and exclusions and all those sorts of things. Right now, most insurance is regulated by the state. And so what this bill would essentially do is it would say, as long as you provide the federal minimum coverage required by federal law, and everything else is allowed. It's an insurance company allowed by the state regulator, and it complies with the state regulations on exclusions and deductibles, et cetera, then it's fine. That would be allowed as an alternative. So this would actually encourage private flood companies to get into the market. It would allow homeowners to step forward and say, NFIP, we believe we could get better coverage for less cost in the private market, and they could put forward, the mortgage company could accept that, and it would allow for options in addition to the NFIP. So, again, we support the federal flood insurance program, but we also support private options because options and competition tend to bring prices down. So that's what this bill does. We're supporting it, and so we're very excited about that legislation.
So what are the chances that this bill continues forward and sees the light of day?
Well, so the reauthorization legislation is going to probably package a number of different bills together. I would rate the chances of this bill or some version of this bill being included in that legislation is very high.
And it's passed in the past before with NAR's support.
It passed in the House last year. It passed 419 votes to 0 in the House. Every member of the House that was present that day voted yes. The last time, I don't know the last time there was a flood insurance bill that passed either House of Congress unanimously. So, this is a legislation with broad bipartisan support. There wasn't time to take it up in the Senate, but it'll come up again as part of the reauthorization. And I frankly think that there's a lot of interest in this Congress. How can we take the risk that we have in the flood insurance program and the $25 billion in debt, and how do we spread some of that risk to an interested private market that's willing to take up some of that risk from the NFIP?
Now, there was also a recent hearing on this issue, the House Financial Services Committee, and they have jurisdiction over flood insurance. What's Congress looking at, and how is NAR involved?
Yes, there was a hearing. The first hearing was held this morning in the House, and it will hold its hearing next week. This morning it was to talk with the National Flood Insurance Program, get some of their ideas for reform. NAR has put forward our principles, our ideas for reform. First and foremost, we want to make sure that the program is reauthorized on time and long term. And the good news from this morning's hearing is there seems to be a lot of recognition that we can't go back to a couple of years ago when the program was shutting down and be extended month to month. And uncertainty is not a friend of the real estate market. And so there seems to be a lot of recognition that we don't want to have that happen again.
Well, thanks for doing this. I know there's a lot happening. It's important for current homeowners and for future sales. So as we get more information, we'll be making it available. Stay with us on nar.realtor, and thanks for watching.